to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by White House reporter Haisten Willis. Haisten, President's been overseas. He's had a big trip where he's had multiple meetings. What is the big takeaway, and what was sort of the really important thing that he did while he was over there?
Yeah, Biden had a pretty busy week. He went almost all the way around the world. He went to Egypt and he went to Indonesia. The biggest thing he probably did while he was gone, there were two conferences there. The first was the COP20, which is a climate conference in Egypt. The second was the G20, which is more of an economic-focused conference of leading nations that happened in Indonesia. The big thing everyone was looking for there was Biden's sideline meeting with Chinese President Xi. Obviously, there have been rising tensions between the U.S. and China for a long time, and those continue to escalate in recent months, recent years. There have been, of course, tariffs that Trump put on China. China retaliated with tariffs of their own. Biden has actually really kept most of those tariffs. More recently, we had House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who flew into Taiwan. China made a whole bunch of noise about that. We were very upset about that. And there's that continuing threat of an escalation there, all the way up to potentially China invading Taiwan. So this is a very, very closely watched meeting between Biden and Xi. Nothing really happened from the meeting itself. I mean, they both had readouts about things they talked about. Biden talked about they need to cooperate and work together and not have conflict and that kind of thing. So we don't really have a huge takeaway yet, but certainly that's going to be a very closely watched relationship between Biden and Xi going forward.
Right, and so we knew that the meeting with Xi was going to happen during his overseas trip, but there was sort of a surprise while he was abroad. There really could have been a major international incident, though it does seem to be diffused somewhat since then. Talk a little bit about the sort of scare that President Biden experienced.
Absolutely. The biggest story of all probably during the G20 conference was not something related to the conference, but something that happened elsewhere during it, and that was two missiles, I believe it was, that landed in Polish territory and ended up killing a few Polish civilians. Obviously, this is related to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The fact that missiles hit Poland was a very big deal because Poland is part of NATO. Biden had said before the invasion, we're not going to send troops into Ukraine, and we still haven't done that, but we will protect every inch of NATO territory. So if it turned out these missiles did come from Russia, this was going to be a very big situation. What do we do? Do we send troops now? Whatever. There was a hastily convened meeting of the G7 nations that Biden convened, also at the G20 conference. As it turned out, though, this was a defense missile that was launched by Ukraine. So it ended up being, I don't want to say a dub, but maybe more of a tragic accident rather than an escalation like I thought it may have been.
So it really will end up, if everything in the investigation bears out, it's going to end up that it doesn't escalate the war or get the U.S. and NATO allies involved in it more directly.
Yeah, more of a footnote, but again, it looked for a second there that it was going to be a really major event in this war.
So while Biden was away, and now that he's returned home, Republicans did finally clinch the majority in the House, so there has been a change in control there. What could that potentially mean for President Biden's legislative agenda going forward? It
means a lot. It means it's going to be very difficult for him to get what's left of his agenda through Congress. He's going to have to convince some members of the Republican caucus in the House to vote for it, and of course he's going to have to convince the new House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, to bring it up for a vote, which he will have the power to not do. So the big story after the midterms was that Democrats did well, and that's because historically the party that is in power loses a lot of seats in the midterms. The story is they did well, but that's because they lost less than they were supposed to. So we still got to deal with the majority, with a Republican majority in the House, as you said. Now, there is a little bit of a silver lining here for Biden, potentially, as we're looking to 2024. I spoke with a Democratic strategist the other day who was talking about this, that the House gives Biden a bit of a foil now. If he does try to propose things and talk about things in speeches that he wants to do, and then the GOP-led House does not go along with this, he can then point to them and say, I tried to do this, they're obstructing my agenda, they're not helping me help the American people, that kind of thing. And he can use that to boost himself in the 2024 election if he does choose to run again.
Right, and that's certainly how it's worked in the past when Republicans have taken over under Congress under Democratic presidents. And President Biden has a particularly contentious relationship, to the degree that a relationship exists, with the likely House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. He has called Kevin McCarthy a MAGA Republican, mega MAGA, ultra MAGA, all the rest of it, in a way that he's never really done with Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, Biden went very, very hot and heavy in the last few weeks of the midterm elections, going after Republicans, MAGA Republicans, ultra MAGA, mega
Right.
MAGA, saying how they were dangerous, they were going to take away Social Security and Medicaid, they're not going to accept the outcome of elections, which of course they now have.
Right.
But he certainly went pretty scorched earth there and didn't do himself any favors in building the relationship with Kevin McCarthy ahead of them working together in the next 2 years.
I guess maybe he'll run against McCarthyite tactics.
We'll see, that's right.
Thank you, Haisten. You can read Haisten and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.